never thought lying could feel so heavy. And yet, here I was, pretending to be the boyfriend of Luke's older brother, the very person whose life I had sworn to complicate with nothing but an innocent pretense. Honestly, it was supposed to be simple. A weekend visit, a little white lie to keep family expectations at bay, and no one would get hurt. But simplicity was clearly overrated when hearts were involved. I parked my beat-up sedan outside the quaint cottage-style house Luke called home when he was in town. The sort of place that made you want to sip lemonade on the porch and pretend time didn't exist. Inside, laughter bounced off the walls, a chorus of casual American family warmth. Luke's older brother, Jason, was busy making awkward small talk with his friends, leaving Luke and me alone by the fireplace. "Didn't expect to see you here," Luke said, his voice soft but carrying that subtle edge of curiosity that always made my chest tighten. He was lounging on the armrest of a sofa, casual, effortless, yet with a presence that demanded attention without trying. Every motion, every glance was deliberate, or maybe that's just how my brain was reading it. I laughed nervously, adjusting the strap of my messenger bag. "Yeah, well, your brother insisted I come along. Family obligation and all that." Luke's smirk was a curve that could undo me entirely. "Family obligation, huh? Convenient excuse for dragging me into your complicated life." His eyes, a shade too bright for their own good, studied me. "You're surprisingly calm for someone who's supposedly pretending." I shrugged, trying to mask the thundering of my heart. "I guess I'm just good at pretending. Or maybe you're bad at it." His comment landed softly, teasingly, but underneath, there was an intensity that made my stomach knot. The thing about Luke was that he had this magnetic pull. It wasn't just his smile, which could light up even the coldest winter day, or the way he laughed at the ridiculous things his brother said. No, it was something deeper, a raw honesty, an unguardedness that made me want to spill secrets I didn't even know I had. The weekend unfolded like a delicate dance of half-truths and stolen glances. Every family dinner was a minefield. I had to laugh when Jason introduced me to his college friends as my boyfriend, all while Luke's amused smirk never left his face. I had expected tension, maybe even awkwardness, but instead, it felt intoxicating. Late one evening, we ended up outside on the porch, the autumn breeze threading through the fading warmth of the day. Luke was sketching in his notebook, eyes focused, lips slightly pursed. I leaned against the railing, pretending to watch the stars while actually watching him. "You're quiet tonight," he said without looking up, voice low and thoughtful. I chuckled, trying to sound casual. "Maybe I'm just enjoying the view." My heart betrayed me with a quick skip. "Is that so?" His gaze finally lifted, catching mine, and the way he looked at me made my chest ache. There was a question there, unspoken, hovering between us like electricity. I swallowed hard. "Yeah, the view." Truthfully, it wasn't the sky I was admiring. Luke set his pencil down and turned fully toward me. The porch light flickered, casting shadows that danced across his sharp features. "Pretending doesn't suit you." I frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" "Nothing. I think you're better at being honest. Even if honesty is dangerous." His words hit me like a bullet disguised in silk. Dangerous, honest, him, all together. The next morning was chaos disguised as calm. Jason had invited his old friends over, filling the house with laughter, music, and the smell of pancakes. I found myself seated next to Luke at the breakfast table, the pretense of our roles wearing thinner with each shared glance. "So," he said, leaning slightly closer, "how's pretending to be someone's boyfriend?" "Fun. It's complicated," I admitted, the truth slipping out like a confession. "More complicated than I thought." "Yeah," he said softly, almost to himself, but loud enough for me to hear. "Complicated can be interesting." The corners of his mouth quirked up, teasing yet warm. My stomach twisted, and I realized I'd been holding my breath. Hours passed, and we wandered the nearby park. The American town in fall was breathtaking. Leaves in shades of orange, gold, and crimson created a tapestry of fleeting beauty. We walked side by side, close but careful, the kind of proximity that made every brush of his shoulder feel electric. "You ever think about other possibilities?" Luke asked suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. His eyes were serious now, searching mine like he wanted to uncover every hidden thought. I froze slightly, unsure of how to answer. "Other possibilities?" "Yeah," he said, kicking a pile of leaves lightly with his sneaker. "Like, what if this isn't just pretending? What if there's more?" My heart stopped. The words were simple, almost casual, yet they carried a weight that could crumble worlds. I forced a laugh, though it came out shaky. "I think some things are better left unspoken." Luke's gaze softened, and he reached out, brushing a fallen leaf from my shoulder. "Maybe, or maybe we just need the courage to say them." For the first time, I felt the walls I had carefully built start to crumble. Pretending to be someone's boyfriend had been a way to hide my feelings, to play a safe game. But Luke didn't allow safety. He demanded truth whether I was ready or not. That night, as the house settled into silence, I found myself in the small art studio Jason had set up for Luke. The scent of paint and charcoal filled the air, intoxicating in its authenticity. Luke was hunched over a canvas, every stroke deliberate, intense. "Hey!" I whispered, stepping closer, though unsure what I wanted to say. He didn't look up immediately. "Hey!" he replied after a pause, voice low, thoughtful. Then he finally turned, eyes locking onto mine. "You know, you don't have to pretend with me." "I know," I murmured, though my voice betrayed me. Pretending had been all I knew. But now, standing here, watching him, my heart refused to lie. We stayed there for a long time, the world outside forgotten. No words were necessary. The unspoken connection between us was loud enough to drown out everything else. I realized then that I didn't just care about Luke. I was already in too deep, tangled in emotions I hadn't expected to feel. The weekend hurtled toward its inevitable end. Jason was oblivious to the undercurrent, busy making jokes and snapping photos. I played my role well, but Luke and I shared glances that said more than any words could. On the last night, we found ourselves on the porch again, the sky a deep indigo sprinkled with stars. Luke leaned back against the railing, and I mirrored him, the distance between us smaller than ever. "You're leaving tomorrow," he said, almost as a statement, almost as a question. "Yeah," I replied, trying to sound casual, but my voice wavered. "Back to reality." He didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, softly, "Reality isn't always what we expect." I swallowed, heart pounding. "No, it's not." He turned to me, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "So, what happens now?" I hesitated, then realized that the lie had run its course. Pretending to be someone else's boyfriend had been a mistake, but it had also led me here. To him. "I guess we find out," I said, voice steady despite the storm inside. "Find out what we really feel." Luke's hand brushed mine, tentative but intentional. The touch was electric, promising, and terrifying all at once. And in that simple contact, I knew everything had changed. The stars above, the autumn breeze, the quiet town, they all bore witness to the beginning of something real. Something that had started as a pretense but had blossomed into the unexpected, beautiful truth of us. The morning after that porch conversation, I woke up feeling like I was teetering on the edge of something new and terrifying. The sun slanted through the blinds, painting stripes of light across the room where I had crashed on the guest bed. Luke wasn't there yet, and for some reason, the emptiness of the space made me realize just how much his presence had taken over my thoughts. I wandered into the kitchen, where Jason was already tinkering with a French press, humming some tune I didn't recognize. "Morning," he said cheerfully, as if nothing complicated had happened the night before. "Morning," I replied, trying to sound casual. "Luke went out for a run," Jason said casually. "He'll be back in a bit. Don't drink all the coffee, all right?" I smiled weakly and poured myself a cup, the aroma grounding me slightly. But as I sipped, my mind wandered back to Luke, the curve of his jaw, The way his eyes had held mine last night. The way his hand had brushed against mine on the porch. Pretending had become impossible. I was in way over my head. By mid-morning, Luke returned, cheeks flushed, hair tousled from the run. His hoodie clung to his lean frame, and I realized that even casual athletic wear could make my stomach do somersaults. He greeted me with a half-smile, the kind that made it hard to read his thoughts. "You're up early," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "Had trouble sleeping," I admitted, and the words were true. Not from worry about the pretense, but from the weight of what was growing between us. "Me too," he said quietly. Then, as if brushing off the tension, he asked, "Want to come check out the downtown art festival with me today?" It sounded innocent enough, but I knew Luke well enough to sense that there was more to it. He wanted time together, alone, away from prying eyes and family chatter. I nodded eagerly, and soon we were driving through the small town streets, the sunlight catching the red and gold leaves that littered the sidewalks. The festival was bustling. Music drifted through the air. Artists displayed vibrant paintings, sculptures, and handmade crafts. Luke guided me through the crowd, our shoulders brushing occasionally, sparks igniting with each accidental touch. I felt a thrill every time his gaze found mine. Every time a laugh shared between us held a deeper meaning. At one point, we stopped at a stall selling vintage vinyl records. Luke's fingers hovered over the covers, and I noticed the way his brow furrowed slightly in concentration. "You have good taste," I said lightly, and his smile curved just for me. "Maybe," he said, "but I bet you know better." I shook my head, pretending to consider, but in reality, I was distracted by him entirely. "Maybe I'll let you pick," I said, and he raised an eyebrow, mischief dancing in his eyes. "Is that so?" he teased, leaning slightly closer. The air between us seemed to hum with unspoken tension. I caught my breath, aware that we were standing in the middle of a crowded street, yet it felt like we were in our own private bubble. Later, we wandered near the fountain at the town square. Luke stopped, gazing at the water, and I followed his eyes. "You know," he said softly, "sometimes I wonder why people hide what they feel. Pretending seems exhausting." I swallowed hard. "Yeah," I murmured, "especially when the heart doesn't listen to the brain." He turned to me, the expression on his face unreadable at first, then softening into something tender. "Do you feel that way? With me?" I wanted to lie, wanted to say nothing, to keep the pretense alive. But the truth had grown too strong. Yes," I admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "I think I've been feeling that way for a long time." His eyes widened slightly, a mixture of surprise and something warmer. "I'm glad," he said finally, and the simplicity of the words made my chest ache with relief. The festival faded into the background as we walked together, closer now, sharing little confessions and quiet laughter. Luke had a way of making everything feel ordinary and extraordinary all at once. I found myself talking about my dreams, my fears, things I had never shared with anyone, and he truly listened without judgment, without impatience. By late afternoon, we found a quiet bench overlooking a small pond. Ducks floated lazily, the water reflecting the fiery hues of autumn. Luke leaned back, his shoulder brushing mine, and I felt the familiar electric tension tighten between us. "You know," he began, "pretending to be my brother's boyfriend. It was a clever plan." His voice was teasing, yet there was an edge of something serious beneath it. I laughed nervously. "Yeah, clever until I realized I couldn't keep my heart in check." He turned to face me, eyes locking onto mine. "And what's your heart telling you now?" "That I don't want to pretend anymore," I said honestly. "That I want to be with you. No lies, no excuses." Luke's smile was soft, genuine, and something about it made the tension in my chest dissolve. "Good," he whispered, leaning closer. The world around us blurred. The pond, the ducks, the distant chatter of festival goers, all fading into insignificance. Our first kiss was tentative, shy, filled with the awkward sweetness of new beginnings. But it quickly deepened, fueled by all the months of stolen glances, unsaid words, and suppressed longing. The kiss carried the weight of our hidden feelings, the thrill of stepping beyond pretense into something real. After pulling back, we laughed softly, breathless, foreheads resting together. "I guess the weekend just got a lot more complicated," I said, teasing lightly to mask the trembling in my voice. "Complicated can be fun," Luke replied, smirk returning, though his eyes betrayed sincerity. Back at the cottage, the evening descended in quiet intimacy. Jason had left for a late dinner with friends, leaving us alone. The house was peaceful, filled with the scent of cinnamon and baked apples from earlier that day. We found ourselves in the living room, sitting close, shoulders brushing, hands tentatively touching. "I should probably warn you," I said, heart pounding. "I'm terrible at relationships." Luke chuckled, eyes warm. "That's fine. I'm not exactly an expert either." The honesty in his voice made my chest tighten. We talked for hours, about art, dreams, past mistakes, and moments of vulnerability. It was intimate, electric, the kind of connection that made every heartbeat feel like a drum in a symphony written just for us. As the night deepened, we ended up on the porch again, a recurring sanctuary for our conversations. The stars above seemed endless, the autumn breeze gentle against our faces. I found myself resting my head on Luke's shoulder, and to my surprise, he didn't pull away. Instead, he draped an arm around me, holding me close. "You know," he said quietly, "I never expected you to actually like me. Not like this." "I didn't expect it either," I admitted, voice soft, almost a confession to the universe itself. "But I do. I like you more than I thought I could." Luke smiled, and it was a smile that spoke of relief, hope, and something dangerously close to love. "Good," he said simply, "because I like you too." Days passed in a blur of quiet intimacy and gentle teasing. The pretense that had brought us together faded completely, replaced by honest glances, small touches, shared laughter, and a growing awareness that our bond was real. We explored the town, the forests on its outskirts, even revisiting some of Luke's favorite hidden spots, places he rarely shared with anyone. One rainy afternoon, we ended up in a small cafe tucked away behind the town square. The sound of rain tapping against the windows created a cocoon of warmth and privacy. Luke sat across from me, fingers wrapped around a steaming mug, eyes serious. "You know," he said slowly, whatever we're doing, it's scary, isn't it?" I nodded. "Yeah, but good scary. The kind that makes you want to hold on tighter." He smiled softly, leaning across the table, hands covering mine. "Exactly. That's how I feel." The simplicity of the moment, the warmth, the connection, the honesty made my heart swell. I realized then that what had started as a lie had grown into the most genuine, vulnerable, and beautiful experience of my life. By the end of the weekend, as I packed my bag to leave, the air was filled with an unspoken promise. Luke and I stood on the porch, the small town stretching around us, golden leaves drifting in the wind. "I guess this is goodbye. For now," I said, forcing a smile. He shook his head, taking my hands in his. "No, not goodbye. Just see you later, because the sustus is real." I nodded, heart pounding, feeling the weight of his words sink in. The pretense was over, but the journey had just begun. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to step into it, fully and without fear. The weeks after that weekend were a delicate balancing act. Texts and calls filled the gaps between visits, and every message from Luke made my chest tighten in the best way possible. I found myself daydreaming about the next time I would see him, imagining stolen kisses in quiet corners, long walks in the autumn light, and the small, tender moments that made our bond feel unshakable. But reality had its complications. Jason, oblivious to the sparks between Luke and me during the first weekend, began noticing subtle changes in our dynamic. He teased Luke more frequently, hinting at curiosity about his brother's new friend. I had to tread carefully, keeping our secret under wraps while also trying to navigate my growing feelings. Pretending was long gone, replaced by something deeper, more vulnerable, and entirely real. One Friday afternoon, I drove back into town, the familiar streets painted in hues of late fall. Luke was waiting outside the small cafe where we'd first shared a quiet moment alone. He smiled the moment he saw me, and my chest felt impossibly light. "Hey," he said, his voice low and teasing, but soft with something deeper. "I've missed you." "I've missed you too," I replied, climbing out of the car. My hands brushed his, and the contact sent a familiar thrill through me. We spent the day wandering through the small town, laughing at absurd trinkets in the antique shops, sharing coffee under umbrellas as rain fell lightly, and talking about everything and nothing. Each glance, each brush of hands, each fleeting smile reinforced the truth I had already accepted. I was hopelessly, irrevocably in love with him. Later, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, we found ourselves at the town's hilltop overlook. The entire town sprawled beneath us, bathed in golden light. Luke took a deep breath, then turned to me. "You know," he said softly, "I've never felt like this before. Like, I could just be myself and someone would still want me." I shook my head, heart swelling. "You're amazing, Luke. Anyone would be lucky to have you." My voice caught, betraying how much I truly meant it. His eyes softened, and he leaned closer. "I don't want anyone else. I want you." The words hung between us, simple, powerful, and utterly transformative. I reached up, touching his face gently. "Then you've got me," I whispered, and for the first time, I felt no pretense, no fear, only the pure certainty of us. Our first real, unhurried kiss that evening was unlike anything I had experienced before. Not stolen, not tentative, just full of warmth, trust, and promise. The world seemed to melt away around us, leaving only the two of us in a bubble of golden light and quiet intimacy. The following weeks were filled with small adventures, each moment reinforcing the connection we had built. We explored art galleries, shared quiet dinners, and even began collaborating on small creative projects. Luke's sketches often became part of my own photography, blending our perspectives into something uniquely ours. Despite the joy, there were moments of doubt, moments where I questioned whether Jason would ever accept this new dynamic between us, whether our long-distance weekend visits could survive the pressures of reality, and whether I had the courage to let myself fully fall. Luke, however, remained steadfast. Every message, every call, every visit carried reassurance, and gradually, I learned to trust not only him but myself. Pretending to be someone else had been a lesson, a necessary detour that had led us to this undeniable truth. Our hearts belonged together. One chilly evening, as winter whispered its arrival with frosty air and distant snowflakes, I found myself standing at the doorstep of Luke's house again. Jason was inside, engrossed in a video game, oblivious to our arrival. Luke opened the door, his hair damp from the snow, cheeks flushed, and eyes shining with warmth. "Hey," he said, pulling me close immediately. "Ready for a weekend of nothing but us?" I laughed softly, hugging him back. "Absolutely." Inside, the house was cozy, filled with the scent of baking bread and pine from the small tree in the corner. We spent the evening cooking together, laughing at each other's mistakes, and eventually curling up on the couch under a blanket, feet entangled, hearts synchronized. The quiet intimacy of the moment made the world outside irrelevant. As night fell, Luke rested his head on my chest, tracing small patterns along my arm. "You know," he murmured, "I think we're exactly where we're supposed to be." I smiled, pressing a kiss to his temple. "I think so too." The following morning, we ventured out for a walk through the snowy streets. The world was peaceful, blanketed in white, and the only sounds were our footsteps and occasional laughter. We stopped at the park, now serene and empty, and Luke pulled me close, hands brushing over my shoulders. "I love you," he said suddenly, voice low, sincere, carrying a weight and warmth that made my chest ache. "I love you too," I replied without hesitation, knowing in that instant that every lie, every pretense, every stolen glance had led us here. He smiled, brushing his lips against mine in a gentle, lingering kiss. "Promise me," he said softly. "We'll always be honest. No pretense, no hiding, no holding back." "I promise," I whispered, tightening my arms around him. "Forever." Jason eventually noticed, of course. The initial teasing gave way to acceptance, and surprisingly quickly. Perhaps he saw the truth in our smiles, in the way we looked at each other, in the quiet understanding that had grown between us. Our secret was no longer hidden. It was celebrated, quietly but genuinely. The months that followed were a blissful rhythm of shared lives, small adventures, and endless laughter. Every touch, every glance, every whispered, "I love you," reminded us that the complicated, chaotic journey we had started was worth every moment. We were no longer pretending. We were living, and it was perfect in its imperfection. One late spring afternoon, as the sun cast long golden rays across the small town streets, Luke and I sat on the porch, sipping iced tea, watching the world wake and shimmer. "You know," he said, leaning against me, "I used to think love had to be dramatic, complicated, something out of a story." I laughed softly, fingers threading through his hair. "Turns out, it's just this. Simple, real, us." He smiled, resting his forehead against mine. Us. And in that moment, everything fell into place. The lies, the pretending, the uncertainty, it all led to this perfect, quiet truth. Our hearts were no longer lost in pretense or fear. They were together, unshakable, full of laughter, love, and the promise of every tomorrow. I kissed him gently, savoring the warmth, the closeness, the undeniable reality of us. "Forever," I whispered again, and he echoed the word with a soft, happy laugh. "Forever," he agreed. The world continued around us, leaves rustling in the gentle breeze, children laughing in the distance, life moving forward in its ordinary way. But for Luke and me, time had slowed, stretched, and bloomed into something extraordinary. Something that began with a lie, but grew into a love that was honest, tender, and utterly ours. And for the first time in a long while, I knew with certainty that pretending was over and reality had never felt more beautiful. We stayed like that for hours, wrapped in each other's arms, the small town unfolding before us, a quiet witness to the love that had blossomed against all odds. No pretense, no games, just us. And it was enough. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.